Today is the big day. The 2025 NBA Draft is here. An opportunity for our Golden State Warriors to look to better this roster for the short term and the long term. And we'll see where all of these fun and talented prospects will start their NBA careers. Last episode was the draft lottery. The big storylines include the Jazz winning the number 1 pick. The first team with the worst record to win the lottery, I think since the Ben Simmons draft nearly 10 years ago. The Celtics as well, the defending champs who were only a game out of the play-in tournament, end up at number 2. It's a 2-player draft with Mikko Kaponen and Bardo Campolo likely to go number 1 and 2 in some order. And then after that, who really knows? I think this year especially, the draft is going to be extremely unpredictable with players' draft stocks seemingly all over the place, as we discussed in the last episode, which was the draft preview. I'll leave a card to that in the top right corner of your screen in case you missed it. As for our Warriors, obviously we were not in the draft lottery. The only pick we own is ours, and of course we made the playoffs this past season. So we'll be picking at number 22 in the first round, and this is an interesting spot for us because, of course, we have an older team, but we feel like our championship window is still open. But it's probably not going to be open for long, given that Steph Curry is the second oldest player in the league and Jimmy Butler is tied for 4th. So we want to capitalize on these guys while we have them, but we also don't have much young talent to begin with, other than the likes of Jonathan Kuminga and Brendan Pajemski. Most of our roster is already under contract for this upcoming season, which means we have a lot of tradable deals. So if we need to move some players to possibly move up in the draft or look to acquire a veteran, we can do that. We have the ammo to make a somewhat big move if we want, whether that's moving up in the draft or trading out and getting some more established players. The mock drafts have us getting center Albrecht Schwartz, combo guard Rankin Destino, and center Weston Weaver. 3 players who I do like quite a bit. But again, as we look at where the players are projected in the mock drafts, it's all over the place. Dennis Gordon, for instance, one mock draft has him at 6. Another has him going to number 21. LV Mikhailovic goes in the top 4 in 2 of them, and then at 15 in the other. Philip Leopold, 5 and 24. Lazar Badiaga, he goes 10 and 1, 31 in another one. So this draft is going to be extremely unpredictable, most likely outside of the top 2 picks. So I could not upload the draft class. That's been an issue over the last few years, unfortunately. But there is another way for you to access the draft class, and that's by going into Share Scenarios. When I made the video about a month ago going through all of my settings and how to download that, that's in Share Setups, but this is Shared Scenarios because when you download my scenario, Warriors Off Season 1, you'll open it up and it goes to exactly where we are in the Warriors season. So it's kind of cool. You can take over as the Warriors or some other team in the league exactly where we are in this series, and you can use the draft class. If you just want to download the draft class and use it for your own MyNBAs and not hop into this save file, just save it. And there you go. You'll have access to it and all of the prospects within this group. One more order of business before we get started, and that is trades around the league. As I always like to do before the draft, I like to sprinkle in some moves, and there's going to be quite a few. The first of which, and probably the biggest, will be involving the Atlanta Hawks, who had another disappointing season, 34 and 48. They've been stuck in the middle in the Eastern Conference over the last few years, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them look to move on from Trae Young, who had a great season, 32 points per game on the best efficiency of his career. But his contract is almost over. He's under contract for this year and then has a player option for the following season, which I think he would decline. So I think it would make sense for Atlanta to look to maximize value and trade him away. The Spurs have been linked to him, but they got Zach LaVine at the deadline, and I don't think him and Trae Young would really fit in the backcourt. Maybe the Spurs use Zach LaVine in a deal to get him or send him to a third team, though. The Rockets have been accumulating assets over the last year or so. This team doesn't have a ton of star power, but they have a lot of good young pieces, and I think getting a guy like Trae Young could really put this team over the edge with some of the young guys they have. I think the Raptors are another team to watch out for. Toronto majorly overachieved this year, and they obviously made a big deal at the deadline acquiring Jalen Green from the Rockets, and they've got a nice group with him, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley. But Trae Young, again, I think would put that team over the edge as one of the true contenders in the Eastern Conference. So ultimately, it will be the San Antonio Spurs who will land Trae Young in a 3-team deal that will send Zach LaVine to the Clippers. The Hawks are also going to be trading Bogdan Bogdanovic and DeAndre Hunter, a complete reset so they can build around their young guys like Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, Zachary Risache, Dyson Daniels, and now 4 lottery picks. They already have 8 and 12. They'll be getting 7 and 14 from the Spurs, along with another future pick. They'll also be getting Duncan Robinson, Cam Christie, and Chris Dunn. The Spurs will be getting Bogdanovic, while the Clippers get DeAndre Hunter and Zach LaVine. I would argue the biggest winners of this deal might not even be the Spurs or the Hawks. I love this deal for the Clippers, getting Hunter and LaVine without really having to give up much in exchange. So the Clippers are doing this because obviously they don't have a lot of roster flexibility, but this team's actually not in that bad of a spot. They were bad for most of the year. They slid into the play-in tournament, but they got out of the play-in and upset Minnesota in the first round. So this team actually has a lot of positive momentum and showed that Kawhi and Harden can be their duo of the future. Zach LaVine rebounded in a major way this past season after a rough campaign in 2023-2024, and he gives them the third star that they really would not be able to get otherwise. I don't think LaVine and Harden are going to be some great fit in the backcourt, but the Clippers really don't have the flexibility to worry about fit. Instead, they'll worry about getting a great player. So Atlanta gets to kickstart their rebuild with 4 lottery picks. The Spurs now pair up Victor Wembanyama and Trae Young. This duo makes all the sense in the world, a perfect pick-and-roll duo, and they're able to keep a lot of their other key guys, such as Stephon Castle and Devin Vassell, and they still have plenty of first-round picks over the next few years, so if they need to make another move, they can. And then as for the Clippers, they have a big 3 with Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and Zach LaVine. Again, the fit in the backcourt is questionable, but given the lack of assets the Clippers have, Zach LaVine's really the only guy that would work for them. And now, they've got a nice little group. They're over the second apron. It's going to be hard for them to make trades in the future. But again, they don't have many assets to begin with. So I don't think they're really worried about that. With the Boston Celtics jumping all the way up to number 2 in the draft lottery, we talked about the possibility of them looking to move this pick, given the championship window is obviously still wide open with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, despite the team's disappointments this past season. A large reason why they struggled is Derek White, who took a major step back, less than 10 points per game, on horrible efficiency. His field goal percentage this year was worse than his three-point percentage last year, and the Celtics just gave him a big extension. So they need to get out of this contract as soon as possible and might have to float the second overall pick in order to get it done. I think a team looking to make a clean reset would make sense, and there's an obvious candidate towards the bottom of the Western Conference who's been pretty disappointing over the last couple of years, and it's the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, last year, Ja Morant only played like 20 games, so they had an excuse for being bad. This year, that was not the case. Morant played in 82 games, so this roster core just does not seem to be working. Now, obviously, they're not going to trade away Ja Morant, but I think anybody else is fair game, and that includes former Defensive Player of the Year Jaren Jackson, who will headline a monster deal with Boston. The second pick, Derek White and Sam Hauser to the Grizzlies for Jaren Jackson, Gigi Jackson, and Marcus Smart. It seems like a weird trade because I feel like if this was proposed at the start of the year, both of these teams would say no. But both of these teams were very disappointing this year, and it makes sense for each of them to kind of reset a little bit and make a big move. Boston has Tatum and Brown under contract for a while, so obviously they're not going to look to rebuild. And I don't think this second overall pick really does them well. Instead, why not get a guy like Jaren Jackson, somebody who's 6'10", he can shoot the ball, and is a terrific defender. He has some similarities to Kristaps Porzingis, so I think the fit makes a lot of sense. He's not as efficient offensively as Porzingis, but he is a much better defender. And with Porzingis on the last year of his deal, they can ease him out and bring in Jaren Jackson, who's also expiring, but I imagine they'll make it a priority to re-sign him. Gigi Jackson is a good acquisition as well. It looked like the Grizzlies struck gold picking him in the second round last year, but he really didn't get much better. From last year to this year, he as well will be entering the last year of his contract, and the Grizzlies are kind of hesitant on paying him a big deal, given the lack of improvement he made from his rookie year to his sophomore year. And then the Marcus Smart trade just hasn't really worked out for the Grizzlies. He hasn't been all that impactful. So why not have him go back to Boston, where he was a great player for many years? I think this is a great deal for both teams. The Celtics got a lot better. Derek White was a disaster this past season, and they're able to land Jaren Jackson, G.G. Jackson and Marcus Smart. I wouldn't be surprised if Porzingis is on the move with a corresponding deal later. And as for the Grizzlies, they needed a big change, and they get that, hoping to resurrect the career of Derek White. And they've got a good-looking lineup now with Ja, White, Bane. Insert the number 2 pick, whether it's Mikko Kaponen or Bardo Kempolo at the 4, and then Zach Edey at center, with Vince Williams still here off the bench, along with the 9th overall pick. The Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be trading picks 16 and 20 to the Bulls for 2 future first-rounders. I think this deal makes sense for OKC because they already kind of have their 10-man rotation set for this year. They don't need more first-round rookies. Interestingly, after 2026, they don't have a lot of future first-round picks, so I think it makes a lot of sense for them to kick the can down the road. And I think they're going to continue to do this with a lot of their later first-round picks, trade them away for future picks so they continuously have assets and will be able to make a move if need be. The Bulls do not have any first-rounders this year. They still have plenty of draft picks over the next few seasons. They got that Spurs pick and the Zach LaVine deal at the deadline. I don't think it's going to be too valuable. And then the 2029 pick is in 5 years from now. Wendell Carter, the 27th pick, and 3 seconds are headed to the Clippers for Ivica Zubac. In terms of rating, Zubac and Carter are pretty equal, but as we look at their impact in terms of estimated wins added, Zubac has been clearly the better player. I even thought about doing Wendell Carter and pick 15 for Zubac, but the Clippers have literally nothing else they can trade. They have no picks, and they have 3 players under contract, so they have nothing else they can trade other than Zubac, and I felt like pick 15 with Carter was a little bit too rich, but this way the Magic get an upgrade at the 5, and the Clippers have a few more assets along with Wendell Carter, who's not much worse. Darius Garland has been linked to New Orleans for a while, and it's finally going to happen. He'll be going to the Pelicans for CJ McCollum and the 10th pick. This kind of feels like the last rodeo for this Pelicans core, and if it doesn't work now, it probably never will. The rumor that's been going around for a while is a Darius Garland, Brandon Ingram swap, but with Ingram's recent extension, that's kind of off the table. Now, I will say Garland was a lot better this year than he was last year, but he hasn't really recaptured his all-star form from his 3rd and 4th season. So this way, he gets a fresh start in New Orleans. Even though McCollum is rated a little bit higher, I think Darius Garland is certainly the better player and certainly the more valuable long-term piece. But for Cleveland, you're not really getting worse at the point guard spot, and you're getting a top 10 pick. Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley are under contract for a while, so they feel like they have time to be flexible and maybe use this 10th overall pick in another trade, or hope that CJ McCollum can be a good starter for them for a couple years. So this gives Cleveland more long-term flexibility. They get out of the Darius Garland contract, and in terms of rating, their team probably gets a little bit better. As for New Orleans, they get the more talented piece with Darius Garland, who fits really well with this roster. And this Pelicans team is equipped to be good. Again, it feels like it's now or never for them. And if they struggle again next year, I think that team will implode and kind of sell the farm. Maybe Zion would even be available. So certainly an interesting set of moves. A lot of changes. Darius Garland is a Pelican. CJ McCollum is a Cavalier. Derek White to the Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson, amongst others, to the Celtics. Trae Young is a Spur. And Zach LaVine is a Clipper. Obviously, those trades are certainly going to make an impact on our league, but they're also going to make an impact on this draft. 4 lottery picks switching hands, including the Grizzlies getting pick 2, the Hawks landing picks 7 and 12. They now have 4 lottery selections. I thought about maybe having them package those to move up, but with them starting to rebuild, they need all the young talent they can get. The Cavaliers, of course, now with pick 10 as well. So let's get this show on the road. And the question is, who will be number 1, Kaponen or Kempolo to the Jazz? And how will the early picks in this draft affect us at number 22 overall? So with all that being said, the 2025 NBA draft is now on the clock, and the Utah Jazz are up first. With the number 1 pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Utah Jazz select Martin Sifa from France. Welcome to the draft, everybody. A shocker. Number 1 overall. It's not Kempolo. It's not Kaponen. It's Martin Sifa. And to be completely honest, I really don't hate this at all. A 6'9" wing with a 7'5" wingspan. Probably the most athletically gifted player in this entire draft class. The Jazz clearly swinging for the fences on a guy who they believe can be a franchise-altering talent. Sifa is a 78 overall. He's a really good scorer within 15 feet. Terrific defensively. His athleticism and length really goes a long way in that. and I think he can see the floor at a somewhat high level as a playmaker as well. I don't mind the pick at all. The one thing I disagree with is I would have tried to move down from number 1 to number 3, try to maybe get a future first-round pick. But Danny Ainge is the same guy who thought Jason Tatum was the best player in the 17 draft over the likes of Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball. He was right, so I don't think we should doubt him here. The Grizzlies and the Blazers must be grinning, though. Memphis gets their choice of the top 2 prospects, and with the second pick, they select Mikko Koponen, hailing from Finland and the University of Arizona. So Koponen is the choice to the Grizzlies, and of these top 2 elite prospects, I think Koponen certainly fits this roster better because he's more of a true power forward, which is the one spot the Grizzlies really need. This is the guy they're going to use as a second star to pair with Ja Morant, and I think the two of these guys will coexist quite nicely. Koponen is an impressive athlete who can guard the 1 through the 5. He has the size and strength to bang with the big boys, but also the quickness to hang on the perimeter. As an 81 overall, he's the highest rated player in this class. He's a complete prospect minus the outside shot. Terrific scorer, terrific finisher, terrific slasher, good passer as well, averaged over 20 points per game, leading Arizona to a spot in the Final Four as a freshman. And that brings up the Portland Trailblazers with the 3rd pick in the 2025 NBA Draft. They select Bardomiano Campolo from Italy, and he's currently playing for Paris Basket in the LNB Elite, the top French league in the world. The Blazers are going to be without a doubt the biggest winners of this draft because they got one of these top 2 premier prospects to fall to them at number 3 overall. And Campolo joins a talented young core that features Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson, and Donovan Clingan. And I think with this pick, Campolo becomes now the franchise guy in Portland. 80 overall, terrific finisher, another really strong defender. I think he's more of a true perimeter player than Mikko Koponen is. He's a little bit faster, a little bit more athletic, but he doesn't have the size to guard bigs. He's also not a particularly good shooter, gets a lot of his scoring inside, and he's a great finisher, but he needs to improve the jump shot, and if he does, I think he'll be a really good player. With the 4th pick, the Washington Wizards select Lovro Walter Mihajlovic, hailing from Croatia. The top 4 prospects in this draft, all international players, all hailing from Europe. Only one of them, Mikko Koponen, played college basketball. This shows the wave of international talent entering the NBA. 76 overall, really good shot maker, has a flamethrower from beyond the arc, and he's a wing who really sees the floor like a point guard. Not a particularly good defensive player, and I don't think he's the most well-rounded, but he's an impressive offensive guy who I think can be the number 1 scoring option on the Wizards in not too long. Filip Leopold from Slovenia is the 5th pick to the Charlotte Hornets, and the streak keeps on going. The top 5 picks in this class, all European prospects. I'm a little bit surprised Leopold went this high, but I get it. He had a terrific season this year overseas. His stock really rose, and he played just as well as some of the top international prospects in this class. And because of that, he ends up going as high as them. He's a freak athlete who is terrific at driving to the basket, and I like the shot mechanics with him. He's not a particularly great defender yet, but he's really strong. I honestly think he's a little bit better in the post. I think he's going to be more of a forward in the NBA rather than a true wing. Khalil Jordan out of the University of Connecticut is the 6th pick here to the Brooklyn Nets. So finally, an American-born player has been drafted. Jordan is not your traditional high-end American prospect. He spent 3 years at UConn and got better and better each year. This season, he averaged around 20 points a game on over 40% three-point shooting as the number 1 option for the Huskies. I think he's going to be a really good 3-and-D player at the very least, but I think with his offensive upside and his shot creation ability, he can become a lot more than that and should instantly become one of the best players on this Nets team looking to lead a culture of winning. With the 7th pick, the Atlanta Hawks select Rankin Destino from LSU. The Hawks have 4 of the next 7 picks. We're going to hear from them a lot tonight. And they start with Destino, the left-handed combo guard, who I think is a really talented player. Now, I did not see him going in the top 10. This is somebody who seemingly had an off chance to make it to our spot. I think one of the 3 mock drafts actually had us getting him. But I see why Atlanta does this. This is somebody who can run the point. He can run the offense with the ball in his hands, but he can also get open without it. I think he's a good defensive player as well. Isn't an elite athlete, doesn't have great size, but he has a relentless motor on that end of the floor. With the 8th pick, the Atlanta Hawks select Zachariah Rice from Duke. Rice had a terrific freshman season. He averaged 18 points per game, the second highest among freshmen in the country, only trailing Mikko Koponen. And he did it on really good efficiency, I feel like. He's also a strong defensive player as well. I'm not really sure how he was the 8th pick. I think this is the 3rd or 4th best prospect in this draft, and it feels like teams just overthought it a little bit. I think if he improves as a finisher, he will be a complete player. He can guard just about every position on the floor. He's a good three-point shooter. He can provide value on offense with and without the ball. And he's an impressive athlete. Even though Zachary Rizache was the number 1 overall pick last year, I would argue that Zachariah Rice is their best young piece, although Zach Harper says he's the best defensive prospect in a decade. I agree that he's terrific on that end of the floor, but we've lost the plot. Has he never watched Victor Wembanyama? With the 9th pick, the Memphis Grizzlies select Vishnik Plieva, the big man from Switzerland and the University of Kansas. So the national champs had their first of likely 5 players off the board, and to be completely honest, I'm a little bit surprised that Plieva is the first player out of Kansas to be drafted. But I get it. Teams want athleticism and upside, and Plieva absolutely brings that to the table. I think this is the most athletically gifted prospects in the draft. 7'1" with a 7'8" wingspan, a longer wingspan than anybody in this class. The way he moves is freakish, but he's raw. He has a lot of work to do defensively. His footwork is sloppy, but I think this is somebody who has the athletic upside to be terrific on that end of the floor. Either the Grizzlies didn't really like what they saw out of Zach Edey last year, or they just wanted the athletic, worse version of Zach Edey with Vishnik Plieva. I think I see the vision here. And then with the 10th pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Jeffrey Thomas from Tennessee. 2 words to describe this young man: box office. He is must-watch television, a human highlight reel as a scorer. And I think he has some similarities in some ways to Darius Garland. He's slippery with the ball in his hands and slithers to the net, but can also shoot the 3-ball. Cleveland wants their Darius Garland replacement, and they feel that Thomas is going to be a long-term upgrade to Garland. With the 11th pick, the Houston Rockets select Dennis Gordon from France. Gordon has been all over the place in mock drafts. One place had him go at 6th. Another had him fall all the way to 21, and I always felt like this range was most appropriate for him. So seeing him go right here to 11 to the Rockets really does not surprise me. This is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. I think he's really well-rounded, 3-level scorer who can pass the ball, he can play some defense. He doesn't have any major strengths to his game, but he also doesn't have any major weaknesses. I think the floor is high, and I think he's one of the more technically sound players in this year's draft. The Atlanta Hawks are back up. They select Shaedon Barnabas IV out of Kansas. So another Jayhawk is off the board. Barnabas is a really fun player. I think it's going to fit nicely on this Atlanta Hawk team. And I like that the Hawks are looking to Kansas, the team who won the national title this year, because the Hawks need winners on their roster. And I think Barnabas is exactly that. A streaky but talented shot maker who can really light it up from 3. He's a solid finisher, solid defensive player as well. And I think Barnabas is going to be a guy who becomes one of the core 2 or 3 pieces on this Atlanta team if he can hit his ceiling. With the 13th pick, the Detroit Pistons select Rafael Torres from USC. A fast riser, Torres really came out of nowhere and had a very strong freshman season for the Trojans, ultimately making it up to the lottery. He's only a 72 overall, but I like the upside with him. A talented shot maker who can score from all 3 levels. He's not a good defensive player at all. He's going to have to get better on that side of the floor, but the offensive game is there, and if the defense comes along, I think he can be a good piece for them. And with the 14th pick, the Atlanta Hawks select Nitro Rodriguez from Ole Miss. Another riser. Rodriguez had a rough freshman season, but really turned it on as a sophomore, averaging around 13 and 7. He's an explosive, above-the-rim athlete who can really shoot it from 3 himself. He can guard multiple positions, but he's a very inconsistent defender. Nonetheless, I like what the Hawks have done, prioritizing versatility and athleticism with their 4 picks, drafting a lot of wings and forwards. So there are some surprises in terms of guys who have fallen out of the lottery. A lot of guys who we invited to pre-draft workouts. I kind of thought Devin Harbor would be a lottery pick. And then in terms of some other notable names, Kalu Oduga and Geronimo Trinidad are 2 guys who I definitely expected to be off the board by now. Oduga's a 7'2" defensive anchor. He went in the top 10 in all 3 mock drafts. NBA.com had him at number 3. I think they're tripping, but still. Geronimo Trinidad, meanwhile, projected top 5 pick going into the year, but teams are clearly concerned about his size. Measured in at just 6'5", 170 at the combine. I think the board has played out really well for us, so at least for right now, we're going to hang tight at number 22 and not really look to move up. With the 15th pick, the Orlando Magic select Carson Young out of the University of Arkansas. This is a kid who I was really high on and certainly a player who I was hoping would fall to our range at number 22. Young is somebody who really fits the Orlando Magic because what they've really tried to prioritize over there is positionless basketball, and Young is someone who is super versatile. He's basically a 6'8" point guard. He really sees the floor well. He can defend the 1 through the 3, and he's a good shot maker. Shoots it well from 3 for a freshman, and I think he's going to give the Magic some playmaking, some defense, and some spacing, and should be in their rotation pretty early on next year. The Bulls recently got 2 picks today from Oklahoma City, and they select Kalu Oduga from Stanford, the big man. Oduga was a little inconsistent this year, causing his stock to drop from what once looked like someone who could be in the conversation to go in the top 5, but I'm really surprised he fell out of the lottery. He is not a great offensive prospect yet, inconsistent inside, which isn't ideal for somebody who's 7'2" and should be dunking everything. But he's a good defensive player, good rebounder, and the Bulls hope that he'll be the anchor down low on that end of the floor. Lazare Badiaga, the French forward, goes to the Nets. Badiaga is a really interesting player, somebody who picked up basketball just a couple of years ago, and you can tell he is super raw, but he is a complete freak show. Along with Vishnik Blieva, this might be the most athletic prospect in the draft. He's got a ways to go, but he has improved very quickly over the last couple of seasons, and I like the landing spot here in Brooklyn. He's going to play on a bad team where there's not going to be a lot of pressure to perform early on, rather just keep improving. The Utah Jazz select Devin Harbor, the talented guard out of Kansas, another player who I am really high on and was kind of hoping would fall a little bit more. Definitely somebody I would have contemplated trading up for if there weren't multiple other players left on the board who I was still high on. Harbor had a fascinating season this year with the Jayhawks. He entered the season as a 4-star recruit, not really on anyone's radars to go super early, but he started the year on fire and looked like a possible top 3 to 5 pick. He cooled off as the year went along. His efficiency certainly came back down to earth, and Kansas used him in a different role as sort of a glue guy, defender, and he really excelled. In the national championship game, he only scored 4 points. He only shot the ball twice, but he was still very effective, and the Jazz hope he can be a Drew Holiday type for them, pairing up with number 1 overall pick, Martin Sifa. With the 19th pick, the Indiana Pacers select Weston Weaver from Illinois. Weaver's a guy who I think really fits the modern game well. He's a 6'10" center who can protect the rim, he can pop out beyond the 3-point line, and he can shoot it. Has a lot of similarities to Miles Turner. That's who we compared him to in the draft preview. So this makes me kind of believe that Miles Turner, who's an impending free agent, might not return to Indiana. With the 20th pick, the Chicago Bulls select Francis Gardner-Jones from Memphis. 6'8", 210 pounds, a 3-level shot maker who can really get open and hit the 3. A little bit streaky as a scorer, but he did average 15 points per game, one of the top freshman scorers in the country, and somebody who I think has the upside to really improve defensively, and I certainly don't think he's a liability on that end of the floor at all. He can certainly run up the floor quickly in transition, and I think he fits the Bulls roster quite nicely. If he improves defensively, I think he's going to be really good, given how advanced he is as a scorer and as a playmaker. We're almost up, guys, just 1 pick away here at number 21 with the Spurs. There have been no draft day trades yet. We had all the deals before, but nothing during the draft. However, I'm actually making some calls to try to move up 1 spot. I know it seems unorthodox, but with a lot of guys who I like going, there's really only 1 guy who I really want right now, and I'm kind of worried somebody might try to jump us and land him. None of the trades in the Trade Finder really interested me all that much. It seems like they want Buddy Hield. I would rather hold on to him, and I don't think he's really much of a fit here anyway, since they just got Bogdan Bogdanovic in the Trae Young deal. Those 2 guys are already pretty similar. So what I'm thinking is we kind of need some second-round picks. They have an excess amount of seconds. They don't need all the 2s they have, but their roster could use some help. They're good in terms of bigs. They're good in terms of guards. But they need forwards and wings pretty badly. And there's a guy on our roster who I think is a perfect fit here. That being Kyle Anderson. The Spurs are already familiar with him. Greg Popovich drafted him in the first round back in 2014. He was with the team for 4 years, and of course he's bounced around since then with Memphis, Minnesota, and now us. But Anderson is basically like the older version of Jeremy Sohan. Both of those guys are very similar, obviously the unorthodox shooting forms, but also the fact that they're big playmakers, they can guard multiple positions, and he was pretty efficient this year for his standards. 59% true shooting, highest effective field goal of his entire career, per 36, 11, 6, and 5.5. That's basically Jeremy Sohan numbers. I think he's a perfect backup for them. I'd like to get 2 second-rounders back. Again, they have plenty of seconds. They don't need all these picks. So I think this makes sense for both sides. They say no. I was expecting them to do it. I think I'll bite the bullet, maybe take 1 second, and they still say no. So now the idea is moving up one spot and leveraging Kyle Anderson. At this point, I don't think it's worth it. It's a little risky to hope our guy doesn't go just because of Kyle Anderson, but I'm going to take the chance, and ultimately the Spurs pick Chance Palermo. Really good prospect. Not our target, but a really good prospect nonetheless. He hit some huge shots this year for Kansas down the stretch, and I think the floor with him is really high. He's going to be a good 3-and-D player at the next level. Now, I don't think the ceiling with him is all that crazy. He doesn't really provide anything on the ball. He isn't some impressive shot maker, but he can stand in the corner, hit threes, and play good defense. And I think that's really good for a team like the Spurs, who already has multiple ball handlers with Trae Young and Stephon Castle on the roster, so he'll fit this team well. Anyway, I want to look at some trades here for number 22, just to take a look. When I looked at some trades before the draft, there was nothing good, but as you can see, Jarrett Allen is here. Interesting. These trade offers are significantly better than the ones I got before the draft. We could get a guy like Shaedon Barnabas, but obviously Atlanta's not going to do that. So I guess it's kind of the fact that before the draft, teams obviously didn't really know who would be on the board here. But now that we're up and there's some guys who these teams like, they're all of a sudden super interested. The Jarrett Allen trade is the one that really stands out to me. We'd be giving up a first rounder next year, which I'd be hesitant to do, but with Jarrett Allen on this roster, this team would be quite good. So let's say in a hypothetical world, that first round pick next year ends up being in the early 20s, like this pick is. Is that worth it for Cleveland? 2 early to mid-20s picks for Jarrett Allen? I think the answer is no. Jarrett Allen's a really valuable piece for them. He's only 27 years old, and I think they're going to try to work out an extension with him, so I don't think that'd be a very fair deal in the perspective of the Cavaliers. So now that we're on the board here at number 22, who will we be looking at? There's 3 guys who we invited pre-draft workouts to. I'd certainly consider all of them, along with Geronimo Trinidad as well. So I think it's him, Laszlo Zonka, Antoine Celis, and Jabari Springer. With Zonka coming from the Overtime Elite program, intriguing playmaker, solid shooter, but he's not the most athletic. I definitely want to see him bulk up, but strength is probably the easiest thing you can teach. Antoine Celis is a terrific shot maker. The rest of this game could use some work, but he is a dynamic scorer who can be a spark plug off the bench. Jabari Springer would be the nepotism pick. His father, Darius Springer, is the general manager of the Warriors, and I think there's a lot of similarities in Jabari's game to his dad's. He's just a lot worse at everything else except for shooting. I think he's a better shooter than his dad was coming out of college. Darius Springer shot 29% from deep as a rookie with the Blazers. And then Geronimo Trinidad. Why is he falling? I think it's because of the size. Again, 6'5", 170 at the combine. He's a good finisher, but the rest of this game is pretty unpolished, and I guess teams are kind of concerned by the red flags with him. Maybe it'll be a surprise pick as well, but realistically, I think it's one of Trinidad, Springer, Zonka, or Celis. So with that being said, let's find out who the Warriors will take with the 22nd pick in the 2025 NBA Draft. The Golden State Warriors select Antoine Celis from Saint-Étienne, France. He most recently played for Limoges CSP in the LNB Elite League. So ultimately, Celis will be our first round pick and the very first player we're drafting here in the Warriors MyNBA franchise. I think he's a really good fit for this team given his offensive game. 75 overall, somebody who's going to be able to compete for a rotation spot right away, and that's because of the scoring and shot making. It felt like at times when the second unit was on the floor, Brandon Pajemski was really the only guy who could create for himself and for others. But now we get a dynamic player who can move with and without the ball in his hands. Here's a possession of him off the ball. Look at him getting open here around the screen and then with the ball. Pump fake inside, hits the floater. He can score from all three levels. An impressive shot maker from three. He can also drive to the rim, whether that's in transition or in the half court. On this possession, he recognizes the mismatch with the slower defender and blows right by him. Now, the rest of his game could use some work. He's not a great defensive player yet, but I don't think it's for a lack of effort. And we see the flashes he shows defensively. He's got good size for a combo guard. 6'6", 180. He's big for his position, but he moves really well. He's a solid athlete. Again, he can move quick in transition. But again, we're not drafting him for his defense. We're drafting him because he can sling it. He only shot 34% from three this year, but I think it's just because he took a lot of tough shots. I will say, though, the shot diet certainly has to improve. The shot selection needs to be a lot better, but this is somebody who is electric as a scorer, somebody who can be a microwave spark plug guy off the bench. Think Jamal Crawford, Cam Thomas, Lou Williams. I think that's what we're looking at with Antoine Celis, and I think he has the upside to be a little bit more, given that he's a good playmaker and has athletic upside defensively. We'll move a little bit faster here through the rest of the first round. That starts with the Brooklyn Nets at 23, and they get Laszlo Zunka from Hungary in the Overtime Elite program. Going into the year, Zunka was looked at as a top 10 pick, but he was really inconsistent. He's a big, burly guy, but he doesn't play super physical. I don't think he's super strong. And I think if you put him in an NBA weight room, give him some more muscle, I think he could be a dangerous player flying to the basket. Nicolas Papadakis from Michigan State goes to the Raptors. A dynamic shot maker who really didn't put it all together this year at Michigan State, only 39% from the field. But I think he's got some offensive upside. And again, similar with us and Antoine Celis, the Raptors hope that he can be a spark plug for them off the bench. With the 25th pick, the Los Angeles Clippers select Bo Washington from Florida. The Clippers only have 4 first-round picks through the rest of the 2020s, and they're about to make 2 of them. We'll start with Washington, who had a really good sophomore season with the Gators. Impressive scorer within 15 feet, and he's a versatile defender as well. Given the lack of overall depth on this Clippers roster, I think this is a guy who will be able to crack their rotation as a rookie. With the 26th pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Geronimo Trinidad from the Philippines and UCLA. We really let Sam Presti get this demon. As I mentioned earlier, I think he's quite raw, but with OKC, that's fine. He's not going to have to play much as a rookie. They're going to develop him and nurture him, get him stronger, and make his body more NBA ready for the next couple of years where he could be a bigger piece in this rotation. I love the fit for Trinidad, and personally, I never really saw him as a true top prospect in this draft. I think this is really more of his range. I think the NBA got it right with him, but OKC is such a perfect landing spot. He's going to be a stud now. Albrecht Schwartz goes to the Clippers, the big center out of the University of Michigan. Good defensive player, good rebounder. A little bit inconsistent, though, offensively as a finisher. I wish the efficiency for him being a big 7-footer was a little higher. Nelson Evans from Sacramento State goes to the Knicks, a small school guy who stole the show at the Combine, and he's really gotten better through his 4 seasons at Sacramento State with the Hornets. And now here with New York, this is somebody who I think is going to be able to shoot the 3-ball well, and with his athleticism, I think he's going to get better and better and become a strong role player here for the Knicks. The Utah Jazz, with their 3rd pick of the day, select Earl Ewing from North Carolina. Certainly an older prospect at 24, but I think his basketball IQ, given his age, is really solid. Versatile defender, solid scorer. I've been very intrigued by this Jazz draft, obviously with the surprise at number 1, but I think overall they've done pretty well. And with the 30th pick, the Brooklyn Nets select Zamir Logan out of the University of North Carolina, the son of Blazer legend Zay Logan. I think this is going to be one of the steals of the first round. Really good 3-point shooter, really good passer. I think he's going to be one of the best picks the Nets make tonight, and that says something because they've got a lot. So that'll wrap up the first round. Certainly an exciting one, despite the fact that there were no actual day of the draft trades. Certainly a lot of fireworks, including the surprise number 1. The Jazz shocked the world with Martin Sifa. He's rated a little bit lower than Capone and Campolo, but I think he's got just as much upside. And again, I really don't mind the pick at all, and I trust Danny Ainge. Some other surprises include Vishnik Blieva at number 9. He's a guy who I thought would fall to us in the 20s and was certainly on my radar, but he ended up going way before us. But again, the Grizzlies have drafted really well in recent years, so I trust their judgment. Some notable sliders include Kalu Oduga. He falls to 16, and of course, Geronimo Trinidad, who makes it all the way to number 26. As for the Warriors, we hang at number 22. We explored a trade up one spot, but we ultimately stayed pat, and it works out, landing Antoine Celis, the talented combo guard from France. We do not own any picks in the second round. There are a couple guys I like, so we'll monitor what happens here in round 2, and if they don't get picked, we'll maybe explore a move. There are a few guys who we expressed a lot of interest in throughout the year. Jabari Springer, who we brought in through a pre-draft workout, is still here. It would be a nepotism pick, but it would also be a fun pick. So we'll see if he slips along with a couple of the other players I'm intrigued by. Let's get this party started. We're going to fly through the second round as we start with the Timberwolves. They get KJ Jeffries from Oregon. He was a guy I definitely had on my radar for a trade. I'm surprised he fell this far. Jabari Springer goes to Detroit. We'll talk about him in depth a little bit. He's only a 71 overall, but again, I think his game is very similar to Darius Springer. He's a better shooter than his dad, and then, well, obviously he's worse at everything else. His dad was a top 10 pick, an MVP, a finals MVP, but I think he could be a nice piece there for Detroit. Jeffries and Springer were my two targets going into the second round. They end up being the first and second pick. So we'll go faster here. Axel Bronner from Germany to the Hornets. I like Leo Mitchell with the Kings. He was arguably the best player on that Kansas team. Led them in scoring with 15 a game. Final Four MVP. Lennox Morris to the Nets. Rurik Sigurds to the Bulls. I think that's a strong pick here. Joshua Kepler, the big man from Colorado State, goes to the Thunder. Donnie Bridger, University of Miami, stays in South Beach with the Heat. Ricard Larson from Arizona State, the senior, one of the best players in the country, goes to the Clippers. Nate Great from Overtime Elite. I think this could be the steal of the second round. Had a great season in the professional program. I thought he should have been a first-round pick. Dante Martin goes to the Hornets. Jack Kilroy's to the Kings. Really good defender. Very limited, though, offensively. But if you're a specialty player in a sense where you're really good at one thing, then here in the second round, I think that's a fine spot. Paulo Couto from Brazil goes to the Memphis Grizzlies here at number 43. Could be a draft and stash possibility. The Houston Rockets select Tyler Rose, another prospect coming from Miami. So the Hurricanes get a couple guys in a row here towards the middle of the second round as the Rockets add some more guard depth. That'll bring up the Detroit Pistons at 45. They get the big man from Duke, Bryce Davis, a large human being, 7'1", 260 pounds. The Lakers with another really good value pick, in my opinion, Cameron Tylick, 16 a game as a freshman at UCLA, but he was a little bit inefficient and pretty ball dominant, so he's going to have a lot to work on in that sense. Otis Wright to the Jazz, solid 3-and-D wing. Marcus Hill, the big point guard from Duke, great size, great athleticism. He goes to the Wizards. Terry Shelton to the Pacers, very solid role player there for the Wildcats. DeAndre Humphrey from UCLA goes to the Trailblazers. Trevon Walker III to the Charlotte Hornets. And now with a little under 10 picks to go, Zach Schweid, the 7'1" big man, ends up in Washington. Elijah Duckworth, the 6'5" wing out of Oregon, goes to the Pelicans. Brady De La Rosa, hailing from Portugal, very good shot maker, ends up with the Pistons. The Charlotte Hornets again back up. They get Terrence Atkins, the guard out of Clemson. The Brooklyn Nets select Kylian Moss, a talented wing from Memphis. And now with just a few picks to go, Cordell Robinson, an undersized but gritty guard, goes to the Lakers out of the Ohio State University. A.J. Jennings, a big 6'8" wing, ends up with the Mavericks. This could be a fun pick who ends up being a pretty good player. The Atlanta Hawks at number 59 select Matthew Chin, 7 foot, 250 pounds, another large human being coming out of the University of Oregon. And then Mr. Irrelevant belongs to the New York Knicks, and they select Dale Cunningham out of the University of Georgia. Don't give this guy your car keys, and that'll wrap up the second round of the 2025 NBA Draft. So pretty uneventful here for our Warriors. We did not enter the day with a second round pick, and we won't leave today with one. Obviously, the big highlight here in our building has to be Jabari Springer, the son of general manager Darius Springer, going with the second pick in the round to the Detroit Pistons, a team who Darius Springer kind of had a rivalry with and, of course, beat in the finals for his first championship. Highlighting all of these drafts, some highlights include the Grizzlies landing Miko Capone, and I thought Atlanta had a great day with their 4 lottery picks. Of course, the Jazz with the shock of the draft, but again, I think it's going to work out with them picking Martin Sifa, and I really like Devin Harbour at 18. I think he's going to be one of the 10 best players in this draft when it's all said and done. Carson Young, perfect fit for the Magic. I thought the Nets made good use of their picks. Amir Logan's going to be a stud. Khalil Jordan's obviously really good, and Lazar Badiaga has a sky-high ceiling. He could end up being a superstar. The Thunder, of course, with Geronimo Trinidad. Very fascinating pick late in the first. The Blazers got to be thrilled with Bardo Campolo. And, of course, us with Antoine Celis, number 22 overall. And that'll wrap up today's episode. Next time around, we'll go through the rest of the offseason, including free agency. We'll find out if Jimmy Butler accepts his player option. And if not, if he's even going to return to the team next year. Hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.